get over to the next. There you go. Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session on optimizing and streamlining Alma workflows. As Ray mentioned earlier, we will be recording this. So please do put your questions in the chat. For those of you who may have attended my sessions in the past, you know that I tend to do my best to answer questions, and we will do that this time. But with the large amount of participants, I am not 100% positive that we will be able to answer any or all of those questions. But please do put them in the chat, and we will do our very, very, very best to answer them. So as far as introductions, my name is Megan Drake. My pronouns are she, hers. I have been with Ex Libris now for about 6 years. I lead the premium services team here at Ex Libris, which focuses on post-go live services for libraries across all of our products. Prior to joining Ex Libris, I was in implementation focusing on Alma and Primo. And prior to that, I was a systems librarian at the Orbis Cascade Alliance, which is, I was at one of the institutions, and I managed our implementation to Primo, so I've kind of had my feet in both worlds. And just a little fun fact about me to make me a real person and not just a voice behind a screen. I am a very avid supporter of women's soccer, and I live in Portland, Oregon, and play a 5-foot bass drum at all home soccer matches for the Portland Thorns. So if you are ever watching the Thorns on the TV, you will probably see me. And I will let Laura unmute herself so that she has an opportunity to introduce herself. She is the one who will be wrangling the chat for me this morning.
Hi, everybody. My name is Laura Jacobs. My pronouns are also she, hers. I've been with Ex Libris for 7 years, and I've done a variety of things, including support, implementation, and training services. I don't know anything interesting about myself. I'm currently knitting some sweaters, so knitters, yay.
Thanks, Laura. And I am also a knitter, but I am not knitting anything interesting right now. I'm doing a test brioche knit for somebody who's writing a book. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into everything here. We've got a pretty good amount of content, and I want to make sure that we have time to get into it all. So we're going to be talking about configuration, various optimizations that you can do sort of in the moment now to streamline your configuration, make things flow a little bit better across acquisitions, resource management, and fulfillment. And then we'll talk about some analytics reports, and then I'll talk a little bit at the end about premium services. This is sort of a little bit of a taste of what we do here in premium services. So let's dive in and start talking about acquisitions. The other thing I will say as I am talking about all of these various optimizations and things you can do in Alma, I, as a matter of course, for presentations with very large amounts of people, I tend to err on the side of screenshots instead of doing things live in Alma, mostly because I have in the past done these in hotel ballrooms, and I don't trust the internet in hotel ballrooms. So this will be all screenshot based, but if a question comes up that Laura feels that would be best for me to answer and to answer in Alma, I do have Alma up and can jump into it if I need to. Okay, so getting into acquisition. So the first thing that I want to talk about as far as streamlining your configurations is talking about purchase type. So as you all know, purchase type, which you select at the point of order, creating an order, that defines the inventory format, what type of inventory is created. Is it physical or is it electronic? The continuity, is this a one-time order? Is this a continuous order? Or is this a standing order? And then optionally, it can also create and determine the acquisition item material type. But as you know, that's not very robust. I think there's like 10 things to choose from. So what I recommend is to streamline this down, which will make reporting easier and will also make workflows a little bit easier. So to do that, you will go into acquisitions in the configuration menu and then choose PO line types. That will then take you to this table. So this is a very, very large table that can be a little bit intimidating. So what I recommend doing is over here on the right-hand side of the screen, there's an option to export. So I recommend that you take this table and you export that into Excel. Once you export that into Excel, you can then open it. What I have done here, this is a screenshot of, I've taken a snippet of that large file. So this I have filtered down to one time in the continuity and physical for the inventory type. And you'll note that there are 10, 11, I'm not going to count, of these. So you have manuscript, you have visual material, and so these are all of the various options that can come down in the drop down for purchase type. This over here, this source 4 combo, this is the acquisitions item material type. So there are a number of these, but these control what is created in the item, but it's not very granular. You'll notice that there's manuscript, map, microform, sound recording, not a huge amount of variety or oftentimes what libraries use. And the other thing that I will note is that there's also redundancy. You have physical one time, which creates a book item material type, and you also have print book one time, which creates a book item material type. So what I recommend is going through, filtering down for each continuity and inventory type combination, so physical one time, physical continuity, and then going through and highlighting the one that you are going to keep. In general, I recommend retaining one per. So for example, for one time and physical, I recommend physical one time instead of print book one time, because everybody is going to be using this order and it can be confusing if it says print book one time and you're placing an order for a DVD, for example. So I recommend using physical one time, and then you can use the actual material type in the item to be more accurate, because it doesn't really matter what's picked here, it's what's in the item that counts. So you'll go through and iterate, and then you will then have, as you are finished your highlighting, you will then have a list of things that are highlighted that you can then use to turn off the other ones. So once you go through, you have this list, then you can go back into the purchase type and simply go over here and flip this little toggle to be off, to turn off the one that you're not going to keep. And then you will just have the ones that you have decided on that you have retained. And this then here is the list of purchase types that I generally recommend retaining. So you'll want to have physical subscription for those continuity orders, physical one-time, and then physical standing order monograph, electronic collection subscription and electronic collection one time, because those are two different ways that you can order collections. And then for your non-collection, then you would want to have electronic title subscription, electronic title one time, and then also electronic title standing order if that's something that applies to you. You'll also want to have access service subscription and other service one time for any of those non-inventory type orders. These are configurations that happen on the institution level. So you'll want to work together and look at what you have done in the past. It may be that you have used print book one time more regularly instead of physical one time. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and move on. I know that Laura is maintaining and handling the chat, so normally I would pause for questions. In this situation, I am going to go ahead and move on here. So the next thing that we will talk about is order line templates. So this is a way of really streamlining your work in a really good way. You will want to consider creating these types of templates for any common combinations of vendor and fund and location. So if you, for example, always order curriculum materials from the education fund from Gobi, for example. You may want to create a template for that so that when you are creating the order, you don't need to go in and pick that every time. You can just order from the template. You also may want to consider these templates to change your workflows up a bit. Perhaps you want to change how you are doing the electronic resources ordering process. Oftentimes I have seen in libraries that there can be a bit of a disconnect between the electronic resources ordering process. So you have your acquisitions people who very, very much know how to place orders, and that is their strength and their strong point. And you have your electronic resources specialists who know what the thing is that is being ordered. And so acquisitions people may not be as comfortable searching in the community zone. They may not know which collection or portfolio they need to pick, and so they may pick the incorrect one. And electronic resources people may not know all about ordering. So you could create templates here so that electronic resource specialists who are well versed in the resources and what's in the community zone, they could actually kick off that order from the community zone using a template, and then it could then shift to acquisitions to handle while the electronic resources people do their work. The other thing you could do this for would be to move the gift order process to cataloging. So to make Alma do work for you. So instead, when you are getting a gift, instead of manually creating a holdings record and an item record for this material, you could optionally use an order line template to handle the acquisitions method and everything else within that, so that a cataloger would just have to optionally would create the order. On the bib record, holdings and items are automatically created, which solves the need of having to be in the metadata editor for holdings records and manually creating items records, and then they can move on with their day. So it streamlines the process. Cataloging doesn't need to know a lot about ordering. They can just sort of make things happen. So to do that, the first thing you do is you need to create an order. Here I am using the Big Lebowski, which is something I always use at least once in a presentation. So you set any information that you want to be retained in this template. So you will set the material supplier, which in here we have Coots. You can set the fund. You can set the acquisition method. Here we have purchase at vendor system. If we were using gift as an option here, we would have this be gift. You can also set the material type here, which would then control what item material type is created when it's set up, as well as reporting codes. Then, before you move on with that order, you can click on the More Actions tab up at the top, or the ellipses, and choose Save as Template. When you do that, this pops up. You'll want to give it a name that makes logical sense. You will also want to note that it is a public template. That's very important, which is right here. If you choose No here, then you will have this amazing template, but no one else will be able to use it, which is not very helpful for your purposes. So you'll want to make sure this is yes. The other thing I will note here is that if you are wanting to change a template, you'll want to go into this drop-down, choose the name template, and then hit save, and that will basically overwrite what is in the settings before. So once you have your amazing template set up, you'll hit save. And then the next time that you go to order, and this time we're going to be ordering Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?, another amazing Coen Brothers movie, you'll choose the template down here in the drop-down, and this one is public media. That is what I named. So you will choose Load from Template, and when I do that, all of the information I had put into the template then automatically comes into the order. We have the vendor, we have the fund, we have the material type, and we have the reporting code, and we have the acquisitions method. So everything that you set comes in. So you can see how it can very much streamline the processes if you are wanting to shift things to other departments where they may or may not be as strong in the actual ordering process. speaking of acquisitions method, let's move on to that. So acquisitions method is another thing you may want to consider streamlining down. To get to that, you go to acquisitions and then choose acquisition method in the configuration. And so this is then where you see a table where there are a number of things. There's not a lot you can do in this table, much as the purchase type table. You can enable things, turn them on and off. You can move them up and down in the drop down, and you can set them as default value, and you can change the display. So a number of you probably have these things already turned on with exchange and depository and approval and things like that. So I recommend streamlining that down again to ease confusion, make things a little bit better. And so in that, these are the 4 that I recommend. We have purchase at vendor system, which should be your default, approval, gift, and technical. Now, there are others that you may want to also have as well. Purchase may be something that you need if you are actually sending orders out. If you're using Rialto, that may be something you need as well. So you may want to tweak these, but in general, these are the ones that I see people using. Gift and technical are both acquisitions methods that do not require funds or vendors. So that is what you will use in those situations. Finally, let's talk about the claiming task list. So the claiming task list can be accessed in one of 2 places. It can be accessed in the tasks widget in Alma, and it can also be accessed through the acquisitions menu. This is where we have the purchase order lines. You can either go to the order lines with claims or the claim option. So the claiming task list can be a place that people just sort of pretend it's not there. On this screen, in this screenshot, we have 24 order lines with claims. That's a very, very pretty number. Normally, I see this in the hundreds, sometimes in the thousands, because claims are created when materials, physical materials, are not received by the expected receiving date in the order, or electronic resources are not activated by the expected activation date. So this can be very, very helpful and useful, but claims are often inadvertently created during the early days after go live when you're still solidifying your workflows. And so that is how you end up with these claims in the hundreds or the thousands, in which case you need to actually clean this up so that it can be a functional place where you can actually do things. Excuse me. So in order to clean that up, one of the things that you'll want to do is go in and look at various things like that. So you can filter down to these alerts of when they were fully received and things like that. And then you have one of 2 options to drop them off. You can change the expected date, or you can cancel directly from the claim here. So this would be something that was an expected delivery of 2019. If you also had a number of orders that migrated over from your previous ILS that are just old dead orders from 3 or 4 years ago, you'll probably want to go through and cancel them. So you can also push that out. Once you have done that and cleaned up that claiming task list, then at that point, this becomes something that is a little bit more of a useful thing. So you have a small number of order lines with claims that you can then use to actually claim if you are claiming about these things. You can turn on auto claiming so that vendors are automatically notified if a claim needs to occur, if they have an email address. So it becomes much, much, much more functional. Okay, so let's transition now from acquisitions over into resource management. So the next thing I want to talk about is the activation task list. This is another thing that can be a task list of doom, as I like to call it. This is 52, which is a very also nice number to see. You can get at this activation task list in a couple of places. You can get at it from, as I mentioned, the task widget on the Alma drop down on the Alma widgets, excuse me. Or you can also get to it under cataloging. It is the Manage Electronic Resources Activation. Both of those will take you to the same place. So this activation task list is often cluttered due to workflow issues at go live. If you don't have, much like the claiming task list, if you don't have your workflows fully dialed in when you go live, and so you will get old activation task list items that have not been closed out, even though the activation work has been done, which means that this task list becomes a thing that is no longer useful for managing your work, and instead is something that you just pretend isn't there because there's large numbers of things and it's stressful. So to clean it up and make this be a task list that you can actually action on, I recommend that you close all old task list items after you ensure that the resource is activated. So to do that, you will need to go into the individual resources. In this example, we have, if you'll note, the date for it was 2017. So if it's not already activated, we have problems. You'll want to go into test access to make sure that it actually is activated and it works and everything else like that. And then once that is done, the key here is to click on Done. Clicking Done is what closes the task and moves it off the task list. So this is something that people may not realize is an action that needs to be taken. And so if they never click Done, that is how you have thousands of items in this task list. So you'll want to click Done to clear it out. Now, as you are moving through and clearing out this task list, I recommend that you take the status date or the due date and have it sort so that the earliest is on top. You can then work through from the oldest to the newest as you are working through the cleanup by going from the top down. Now, as you are working through cleanups, you will also be doing your normal activation work. So you'll want to flip back and forth with those filters to have them be either the most recent date top or the oldest top, so that you can then work with the most recent materials and then optionally use statuses to filter by the activation work. These statuses are configurable, and you can set these up so that they make sense for your work.
Megan?
Yes.
There's a question in the chat. Is there a way to click Done in bulk like we can for the authority control task list?
I'm taking a moment to think. You can't see, but I'm visualizing Alma in my brain. I do not believe that there is. I don't think that there is any kind of bulk option for clicking Done on task list items. I may be incorrect, but I do not believe that that is possible. But it is an excellent idea, and so I just saw a chat flyby that says that it is a requested upgrade and maybe on the NERS ballot, in which case, vote for it, because I think that that actually is a really good idea. So that should answer that question. Okay, thanks, Laura, for interrupting me. Okay, so as I was speaking about, these statuses are completely configurable. They are your consultant when you are going through the activation, if your implementation, most likely created 5 for you. This is a screenshot of an old system, so you probably have this Primo Central one still in here. Newer implementations will have a CDI instead of Primo Central, but your consultant will have created 5 for you: localize, proxy, test access, make available, as well as Primo Central / CDI, depending on when you went live. These don't do anything or have any functionality. It's just a way for you to track what needs to be done. So you may need to add the electronic resource to your proxy. You probably want to test access and make sure that things work. You probably want to make it available to your patrons once everything is good to go. And you're going to want to make sure that the CDI settings are correct because Primo Central is no longer a thing that exists. So these activation task lists are things that can be set up and configured by you. To do that, you need to go into Resources and choose e-task statuses. That then will take you to this activation task list. You can then add a row. So if, for example, you want to use the activation task list for more than just tracking activations, perhaps you want to be able to create activation tasks on individual portfolios because somebody has reported a problem with the resource and you want to be able to do some troubleshooting. So do you like to create a task status for troubleshooting? You can do that by clicking on Add Row. You can also choose Delete if there are one of these statuses that do not make sense for you. You can go ahead and delete it. In this example, I have myself deleting the proxy, which may not be the one that makes the most sense. But for those of you who went live a while ago, you may want to consider changing this, deleting the Primo Central and adding a drop-down for CDI, for example, adding a status for CDI. So those are all things you may want to consider doing. Okay, the next thing that I want to talk about is licenses. I'm not going to talk very deeply about licenses. I just want to point out that licenses are not generally a day one thing that you think about when you are working in Alma. And I'm not going to speak about how to manage license in Alma, how to create licenses in Alma, or anything like that. I'm just going to talk about the configuration streamlining. So to do that, under licenses, you'll choose Manage License Terms. And then you will want to agree as a group what you are wanting to track with licenses, because the license list and the license terms list is very, very, very robust and can be very large. And so what you'll want to do is hide the items that are not included in the agreed upon list. So to hide it internally in Alma, you'll want to blank out the license section. So to do that, there is a drop down that looks like it's nothing at the very bottom, but that is actually the blank option. When you choose that, it will then make this, for example, accessibility compliance indicator not appear in the license section. You can also choose the order that it displays in the specific section and whether or not it's going to be displayed to the public. So you want to work together to streamline this and make this how you want it to be. The next thing I want to talk about is item material types. This is a place where oftentimes there's a good amount of configuration to streamline. So this is a screenshot of a way that you can access a report that we have built in Premium Services. There is a Premium Services folder in the analytics area. I'll talk about this in a bit more detail shortly. But to get to this in analytics, you will go to the community folder, and then you will navigate to reports, shared reports, and then within that, there is a folder called Premium Services. This folder is where we put any and all reports that we create in Premium Services as part of a delivery of a service that we are giving, if we think that other institutions may also be interested in that report. And so sometimes we will throw something into this folder because we think it might be useful to other people. The caveat that I always give with this folder is that we do not maintain this, and everyone has access to it. So things can change or break at any time. Please do follow the best practices of the shared folder for analytics and do a save as if you're going to be editing anything, because we don't maintain this or check this. Okay, caveat over. The item material type is this report here, item material type usage. You'll want to go in and edit this report or open it. You want to edit it potentially to have it change so that it has things that apply to you. If you just open it and look at the list, this is just a screenshot of one report. So you can see here with the item material types that there can be a very, very long tail of things that are not necessarily used. So you'll want to go through and streamline this down. You may want to, instead of utilizing, for example, DVD-ROM and computer disk, you may want to, and CD-ROM, you may want to streamline all of that down to one thing. Or you may want to take, you have DVD and you have other Blu-ray, and you may want to push those together and just use visual material, for example. The thinking here is that when you are then working with item records, the material type option becomes much more streamlined, which then makes reporting via analytics easier. It makes post-receiving processing work easier because it is very obvious which option that you want to choose. So you will want to take this list with the material type and the number of items that you have in your repository, and you will want to determine which material types will be used. Once you have done that, you are going to want to create sets of items with those deprecated material types and change the material type in bulk. So if, for example, you are going to, on this list, you're going to take everything from DVD and change it to something else, you'll want to just create a set of everything that has DVD as the material type, and then run the Change Physical Items job. So when you do that, you will click here on Change Physical Items in the jobs on that set. You will then make sure that you check the magical box next to the thing that you want to run. If you don't check this box, the job will run and it won't do anything, and it's very confusing. I learned that the hard way many times. So you'll want to check the box and change to the material type. In this example, I am changing to DVD, so perhaps what I wanted to do instead is have Blu-ray, change to DVD, for example. So we're changing this to DVD. Now, we are moving Blu-ray also into this DVD material type. So there's a couple of things you're going to want to do as well. Once you have changed the sets of items via bulk from the deprecated, then you're going to want to do a couple of things. You're going to want to, first of all, disable those deprecated material types so they can't be used again. To do that, you'll need to go under Configuration into Resources and choose Physical Material Type, which will bring up this menu. Now, you cannot add new material types or delete material types. What you can do is disable them, but you can also change the description or what displays. So if, for example, you want to collapse a category, for example, you want to collapse DVD and Blu-ray into a single visual material category, you could utilize the DVD code and just change the description to say visual material. Since you cannot change or add item material types, this allows you to use what is in existence, but make a better catch-all category. Since it is what's description is what displays, you'll just use that. You'll just want to note that the code may also display in analytics, and so you'll just want to remember that when you are creating those things. Okay. Moving on to fulfillment. One of the first things that I always like to talk about in fulfillment is the request monitoring. This monitor requests and item processes, which I'm showing here under fulfillment. This is what allows you to see at a holistic level across the entire institution what is happening with your resources, your physical resources and your items if they are not on the shelf. This is a way for you to see everything. So for example, you'll see when you go into that area, there are a number of facets. One of the first ones that I always like to talk about, which is a very, very useful one, is the way of seeing what is lost in transit. So under request/process type, there is an option here that is transit for reshelving. This is 88. If you go into this and you see that you have a number in the hundreds or in the thousands, don't feel badly. When I was delivering this session a couple of years ago, I had somebody in the room confess that they had, I think, something like 8,000 or 9,000 items that were in transit for reshelving. It's very, very easy for this to grow if you're not monitoring it. So this transit for reshelving status is very unique in that an item gets this status as soon as it goes into in transit. So you'll want to then look at the request date and look at anything that's over a month old. This will give you a list of things that are essentially lost in transit. It could have been that it dropped off a truck somewhere, but most likely what happened was somebody was processing, for example, returns, and was not looking at the screen, was having a bad day, was talking to somebody, and they scanned the first item, and it popped up with it popped up with a message of some sort. And without thinking about it, they then put that book down, picked up the next book and scanned it. That scan cleared the pop-up instead of marking the item in. And so that item that was in transit to that home location got missed. So you'll want to, it's a very easy thing that can happen. So you'll just want to go in. You can see we've got a couple of things here that have been in transit since 2016, 2017. So you'll just want to then export that list and just go do a search. See, are they actually on the shelf or are they actually missing? You could potentially put these into your missing search flows, for example, by marking them as missing and then putting the work order, which we will talk about shortly. So there's ways of managing this, but this is important because it's entirely possible these things are sitting on the shelf, but your patrons don't know they're sitting on the shelf because they're marked as unavailable. So you're getting ILL requests on them or what have you. Okay, that's thing one. The other thing you may want to consider looking at are aged physical item requests. So this is under request process type of patron physical item requests. When you look at that, you can also you can change also to the workflow step of undefined. So in this workflow step, you can see we've got pickup from shelf, we have on hold shelf, we have transit item. The workflow step of undefined means essentially that this is in the holds queue. This has not had an activation on it. It's not from the shelf, it's not on the hold shelf, it's not on the pick list. It's just sitting there waiting. Most likely another patron has it out and that's waiting to be returned. It's just sitting there. So what you can do with that, you can then also filter according to the date. And then this gives you a list of items that have been on request for a very long time. You can then go and also export this list. When you export the list into Excel, this will give you the title, the request type, the MMS ID, and also the requester information, which I have blacked out here because FERPA is a thing. You can then use this to reach out to those patrons and say, hey, I noticed that you've had this on hold for a while. Would you like me to place an ILL request for you? So it's a customer service thing. You also can use this to monitor your cataloging backlog. So you can see under the request process type, you can see things that are in acquisition technical services. Those are things that are in your cataloging department. When you receive and you check on keep in department, that then goes into that work order. At that point, you can see what is in the work order of acquisition technical department and what process it is in. Is it copy cataloging? And then you can also use those date filters to see how long things have been. Other work orders also will appear in here. We've got preservation, we have searching. So all of these work orders also do appear. So you can see where things are in the various work orders. So speaking of work orders can be very, very complicated, and it can be very, very easy to make them incredibly granular, where you have a separate work order for each different distinct type of work. Instead, what you probably want to consider doing is thinking about 3 questions when you are thinking about creating work orders or streamlining your work orders. You want to ask yourself, where do people do the work? Do materials need to transit between buildings or floors? Do you need to track any kind of movement? And do the same people do different types of work that are all managed by work orders? So if, for example, all of this work is done in one location, the material does not need to transit between buildings or floors, and the same people do different types of work that are all managed by work orders. So like, for example, you have your people who do post-receiving processing and copy cataloging and in your back room, and they also do some repair work, some preservation work, and they also do a couple of other things. In that situation, you don't want the preservation work order to be separate. You instead want to use statuses to reflect those different types of work within the out-of-the-box acquisitions work order. Because otherwise they will be having to constantly flip back and forth in the currently at dropdown from the acquisitions technical services department to the preservation department, and it's just maddening. Now, if on the other hand, you have people do the work in multiple locations, materials do need to transit between buildings or floors, and they do not do the different types of work. So you have a set of people that do preservation and a different set of people who do cataloging. In that situation, you want to create different work order departments for the disparate locations where the work is performed. So work order departments truly are a way of noting where the thing is. So that's just a very brief sort of highlight to think about it as options of streamlining.
Again?
Yes.
There's a question. If you change several items, locations, codes, and when you go back to check it in, it goes in transit. Can you fix that in a batch or a global update?
Yeah. So if you change several items, locations, codes, and then when you check it in, it goes in transit because it's going from one library, one place to another, that's probably because you, without knowing how you actually did it, my theory is that this was probably done by creating a move request or something along those lines. If you do it as a job, it should just change it and be fine. The transit happens when you are scanning it in one library and it needs to go to another library. So you'll want to either change things in job, or you could, if you are scanning anyway, you could do the change item information dropdown. I hope that answered the question. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is the lost and missing workflows. So you'll want to create a new work order called search. Optionally, you'll want to attach that to the circulation desk that is used by the staff who would be performing the work via the circ desk configuration. You'll want to create statuses of first, second, third, and reacquire. These are going to store alphabetically, so I would recommend using a number in the code. And then after a search, you'll work from the items in department list for that search work order to select all of the items in each status and increment them as follows. You'll want to select everything with a status of third and update the status to reacquire. You'll want to select everything that has a status of second and update to third. You'll want to select everything that has a status of first and update to second. This order is important because otherwise, if you start with first and move down, you will roll everything through all the way to reacquire as part of the same process. So you need to do it backwards. And then once you have items that are flagged for reacquisition, you can then optionally queue an acquisitions technical services work order so that acquisitions can determine whether they want to purchase it, or you could utilize a purchase request, and then complete the search work order. When you do this and utilize this search work order, items in a missing status then become actionable. So instead of things sitting in the missing status, you can instead create a scheduled analytics report of items that are in a missing status, and then those missing items are moved from missing into the search work order department, and the missing status is cleared so that you can manage them. So missing becomes, hey, I need to do something with this, instead of it's missing. It'll still be noted as unavailable, but it's a useful way of tracking the work inside Alma instead of using some sort of shadow system to track that search. Okay, speaking of the scheduled analytics report, let me just highlight very quickly here a few analytics reports that we have in that premium services folder that you may find useful. So again, that premium services folder is under shared folders, community, reports, shared reports, premium services. As I mentioned, we don't maintain this, but there are a few reports in here that people may find useful, and I just want to highlight a couple of them. So first of all, we have waived fines. So this is a report that gives you all waived fines with the date that they were waived and the waiving staff operator. This came up in a premium service because people were concerned that they had student workers who had waiving permissions, and they were concerned that those student workers may have been potentially waiving things that they shouldn't have. And so this is a way of seeing, according to primary identifier, who is doing what and how much they are waiving things for. So this is out there. Again, you'll want to save as if you are working with these, and then we can handle that in that way. The other thing that I like to point out here is items that are in a lost status for 60 days. I point out this report for a couple of reasons. So items that are in a lost status for over 60 days, you can use this if you want to look at things that have gone lost before you trigger the close lost loan job, which closes those things out. You may want to use that for searching or what have you to create the search work order. But the reason that I point this out is because this report has hiding in it a very, very useful SQL expression. So this report looks at the process type date and does a rolling 60 days. I don't know about you, but I was never ever able to remember what specific day or what specific how to do that code. I could never remember how to do that rolling. So this is where that lives if you don't want to have to Google it. If you're already in analytics, this SQL expression with a rolling 60 days lives in here. You can then use that to tweak it for 30 days or what have you. But I always like to point it out so now you know at least one report that that SQL expression to do a rolling date filter lives. Okay. We also have a purchase order line types report in here. This will give you the PO line type name and the number of orders you have with it. So this is a report. If you go into the process of streamlining down your purchase order line types, you will want to utilize this so that you can look at what you are actually using, so that you can make the decision when you are streamlining to determine what makes the most sense for you. So for example, in this, we have 4,200 physical one time, and we have 2,200 print book one time. So it probably makes a little bit more sense to use the physical one time going forward. Similarly, we've got 47 electronic book subscription and 176 electronic title subscription. So it probably makes sense to use electronic title. But like I said, you'll want to utilize that in a way that makes sense for you and for your data. So those are just a few of the premium services types or the reports that are in that folder. There are a large number more of them. Poke about, you may find something useful, you may not. But again, please do save as you are working with that so that other people can also find it useful. And finally, I just want to take a few minutes to actually talk about what premium services are. So this was just a little bit of a sample snapshot of what we do in premium services. So premium services are one-on-one services to customers that cover workflow optimization, individualized training, hands-on configuration, and the like. If you are interested in premium services, you can email us. That email address is premiumservices@exlibrisgroup.com. What I was talking about here was things that we cover in our optimized service. So the optimized service is 3 days of intensive workflow analysis if we deliver it on site. It takes place over a week. So it's a week's worth of an intensive workflow analysis where you'll work with a consultant to discuss current workflows with your library and identify any possible improvements and knowledge gaps. And then in the second half of the session, the consultant will then present those workflow improvements and deliver targeted trainings as is applicable, and also make configuration changes. So it's a week with a dedicated expert here on my team where we work with you in your system to figure out how you can do Alma better. Sorry, I lost my cursor for a moment. We also offer an extend service, which covers and helps you set up new functionality. So this may be helping you set up acquisitions or to help you determine how all of that goes. So we will help you end-to-end set that up or set up resource sharing. Or you can have purchase some hours where you just have a consultant work with you on a one-on-one basis for a project that may not be part of this. And then finally, we offer the educate service. So this educate service is training. This training is delivered in your environment with your data and we have a menu of available sessions. Those sessions all have significant amounts of time built in to allow for Q&A. And so it becomes much more customized because it is delivered in your environment with your data and you can ask questions. If things you are interested are not part of those menus of available sessions, then we'll work with you and we will totally design and deliver targeted training based on your specific needs. In the CKC, there is information on the educate and the optimize and the extend, as well as links to those training menus. It's also on the Ex Libris website. You can also just email us at that premium services email address as well. So I'm not going to go through these in detail because I pretty much did, and we're just about out of time. So I just want to take the last 5 minutes here in case there were any questions, Laura, that came up in the chat that you wanted me to handle in these last 5 minutes. I just wanted to make sure we had a little window of time to take those as needed.
Sure. There was an interesting question. Can a work order be placed automatically? For example, anything with a location of special collections automatically gets a specific work order. I don't believe you can do that, but it's an interesting thought.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting thought. Their work orders are placed automatically at times. For example, if you're doing an on-the-fly checkout at the circulation desk and you manually create a new item so you can check something out, a work order is automatically queued on that. And if you're receiving something and when you receive, you check on the keep in department box, that automatically creates a work order, but there's not really a way of doing that otherwise. You can create work orders in bulk, but using a job, but you can't do anything like that automatically. But it's a cool idea. Any other ones that you want me to take a peep at?
There is a question from somebody. Let me try and find it. They're going live, currently in implementation. They're going live. Do you think it would be a good idea to streamline POL types now or later for those folks in
Configurations are
implementation?
retained, so you can do them now. But that said, there are a lot of other things on your plate right now as you are probably getting ready for cutover. And so focusing on streamlining PO lines, I would consider that not day one functionality. That would definitely be something that is a nice to have. So I would say wait until after you're live. But if you want to make sure that everything is clean and ready to go, do it soon after. Just prioritize the cutover things is what I would say.
Okay, one more here.
Okay.
Once you've determined that an item is on the shelf, how do you clear the lost in transit status? Is it possible for a cataloger to do this, or does it have to go back to Circ?
Nope. You can, because as a cataloger, you just need to set your, as long as you can set your currently at to be the circulation desk, you can just scan the thing. And scan in items. You should be able to do that as long as you can change from the acquisitions dropdown to a circulation dropdown. And that is not what I wanted to do. I stopped the PowerPoint. That is not helpful. I wanted to flash something else up. Sorry about that. That is me behind my drum. And now I can't find my cursor. All right. So yeah, does anyone have any other questions for where we are? Otherwise, I'm just going to flash the screen up, which has the premium services contact email. You can email me directly as well, which is what that last slide was on, but this might be a little bit better for you.
One more question before we leave, Megan.
Sure.
There's a question about, is there a way to manage templates, talking about templates for creating POLs in batch? I don't believe that there is, but.
There is, but it's in Rialto. There is
Gotcha.
not a way of when Rialto was developed, one of the things they did was make some things a little bit better than the existing Alma flows. And so the way of managing templates is the way that I talked about it. But if you have Rialto, there is much more robust template management.
If I can throw one more question in, we had the question, the tasks seem to be visible to all with the acquisitions role in our Alma instance, even when it's sent to a specific person. Is there a way to limit to a specific staff?
Depending on the task list that is talked about, you can look at things that are assigned specifically to you in that if that is a way that the task list is organized. Without knowing which task list, I can't really answer that in a huge amount of detail. Okay, we are at the top of the hour, so thank you all so very, very much. And I hope to hear from you if you are interested in premium services. If not, please do enjoy the rest of the knowledge days, and I hope you have a great day.
And just a reminder, everybody, a survey will be popping up at the end when you leave today's session. We very much appreciate any feedback that you have to share with us. It helps guide all of the choices we make with our other offerings. So please take a moment and let us know what you thought, what else you'd like to see from us. We really appreciate it and hope to see you at other sessions. Have a great day.